right, everybody. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Blazer Victory Podcast. John Duncan here. And of course, I'm joined as always with my co hosts, Darian Smith and Jimmy Marion. And guys, this episode of the Blazer Victory Podcast is brought to you by Cahaba Brewing Company. Shout out to Cahaba. We had so many amazing watch parties last football and basketball season. And we look forward to having some more football watch parties and basketball watch parties this upcoming season. But today we're going to spotlight the Cahaba IPA. It's one of my favorites. And in fact, one of my good friends, Patrick, texted me literally a couple of days ago and said that is his go-to beer for the summer. So it's one of my favorite. If you see us at a watch party, chances are I'm going to be having an Cahaba IPA or one of the strawberry blondes or blood orange blondes. But you can't go wrong with anything that Cahaba Brewing Company has to offer. So go on down to the tap room or go to a local supermarket and pick up a 6-pack of the Cahaba IPA. But if you go down to the tap room, tell us that you heard, or tell them that you heard about them on the Blazer Victory Podcast. So that means all the world to us. But shout out to Cahaba Brewing Company again. You can go to cahababrewing.com to check out all the latest drink offerings. And before we get started, YouTube. Shout out to YouTube. We got the numbers up, but we still are about 17, 18 subscribers away from the 200 that we're shooting for. So if you're listening to us on an audio platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, Podbean, click the link in your show description and show notes and subscribe to the podcast. And, you don't see a kindergarten classroom in the background. So I'm sorry, the visuals won't be as good for you today coming from my home, but the visuals are solid as always coming from Darian and Jimmy.
I said, John, like the visuals weak. I mean, look at us. I mean, come on, man.
Hey, can't complain. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, come on. That's enough visuals right there, right?
Let's go. One day we'll start the OnlyFans page, but that's a long time coming down the road. And my wife walked in too. So.
Right when you start talking about OnlyFans, she said, "What?"
She said, "What are you talking about, OnlyFans?" Yeah.
Not again.
Oh man. Well, guys, again, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel at BlazerPod, youtube.com/BlazerPod. But guys, we've got a special episode for you today. This is something that, Darian has told us, it's been, he's been very passionate about having this type of episode to just discussing, our defining what does culture mean for UAB football and the program. And, sometimes fans can, I don't want to say roll their eyes when you hear the word culture. Because, you do see every coach and, every assistant coach, everybody on staff always emphasizes the importance of culture. But our very own Darian Smith has a very, very detailed explanation for explaining culture. Because, hey, he played at UAB. He played at UAB football. He's experienced bad culture. So without further ado, I will throw it over to Darian Smith and just talk to the listeners about the importance of the word culture and how this surrounds the UAB football program.
Yeah. I think culture is like one of those buzzwords. It's like, they tell you when you go in to get hired, like the words that you should use. What's some of the words? I'm pretty sure Jimmy knows the words. He's like the HR guy, right? So it's like hard working and
it's a fun work environment, Darian.
Yeah, all of these
challenging fun work environment.
Yeah, all of these buzzwords you're supposed to say to get a job. So every coach used the word culture. So I just really wanted to spark up this conversation because I feel like it's not really nuanced, but it is deep, right? So in the article on the Beham banner, Steve Irvine wrote, he had an interview with Trent, and then he asked about the offensive lineman. And then he said, well, Willie Parker is no longer with us. Willie made some decisions that were not culturally acceptable, right? So to me, so he's moved on. We had a need. So, and he's talked about culture a lot. He talked about bringing in five breathers, and what does that mean culturally. He talked about making when they vet and they recruit guys, like the type of guys they want, they got to have certain qualities for the culture, right?
Our dudes, yeah.
Our guys, right? Every coach talks about this, right? So I started to think like, what is culture and what does culture mean, right? The first word I thought about is discipline, but I feel like it's in conjunction with love, discipline and love. And why I say that is discipline carries you where the love ends, right? Everybody will say, I need somebody that loves football. You got to go and you got to love it, and that is true. You got to love the game, but it's so hard to love everything that comes with the game, right? Discipline carries you when the love is kind of like, oh man, I don't feel like, when you don't feel like doing it. And it's two guys that I want to talk about that I think that kind of embodied that. Joe Webb was like the epitome of like the love of the game. If you ever met Joe Webb, shout out Joe. If you ever met Joe Webb, he is like the most fun-loving. He's excited about everything. And I didn't even play with Joe, but I came right after Joe was done, so we interlapped a lot. I've talked to Joe a lot. The dude is like a walking ball of excitement. Like, you can tell his love and his passion to do almost anything is there, right? So you need guys like that are enthusiastic, that's ready to attack the day. But the truth is, you won't feel like that every day. You ain't gonna feel like that every day. But when I think about discipline, I think about Brian Turner. He played defensive end for us, right? He had a very successful career in Canada. And he sold me my first house, right? Brian Turner is like the epitome of discipline. Like, he probably wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but when you look to your left, you see him lifting the most weights. You look to your right, you see him finishing his sprints. Everything that I didn't feel like doing, I felt like Brian was going to do I don't know if he felt like it or not, but I knew he was going to do it to the fullest extent, right? So you need those two things, because I can tell you, I'm gonna revert this back to me, how I was, and then y'all can put y'all spin on it if y'all want to, feel free. But I was a guy that really loved the game, but I realized, like, looking back at my 34-year-old self, looking back, I didn't have the discipline required to go to the next level. I had the potential, but I didn't have the discipline. Right? I loved the game, but I didn't love everything that came with it. I would be lying to y'all if I sat there and told y'all that every rep, coaches say that they like finish every rep, attack each practice, all of this stuff. I was cheating. Like, I'm trying to see if the coach is looking, let me skip out a couple. I was surviving some of the workouts. I wasn't thriving through them, right? Like, I did enough. Because I love playing the game. I love the physicality. I love the camaraderie. I love watching film. I'm not going to sit here and lie to y'all, tell y'all that. Do y'all know how packed a day of a college football athlete is? I'm talking about along with classes, you got tutors, you have mentors, you have study hall, you have film session, then you have practice, then you have treatment. Then you have mandatory lunch, breakfast. Like, it can get very tiring, right? Then you still want to have a social life. I still want to go holler at this girl right here, right? Shout out to my wife. I met her at UAB, so I wanted to go holler at Shaniqua, right? I wanted to go hang out. I wanted to do all of those things. I wanted to go to the guys, play Mario Kart. Like, I wanted to do all those things, play Madden, whatever. So I would sit here, and when I look back on it, I would have been way more disciplined, as in I need to cut a lot of that stuff out of my life so that discipline can carry me where my love ended. those workouts, those extra workouts you need to do, those team bonding moments, the extra stuff that culturally will take you to the next level, especially at a G5 program. Because you think about these 5 stars, these guys got all the talent. I'm gonna tell y'all this: these dudes ain't disciplined like that. Like I've been down to Tuscaloosa, and these dudes do whatever. But the thing is, they get afforded so much more opportunity and resources than we do at UAB. It almost makes up the difference. Now, when they go to the league, it's a different story. But they're afforded so much more, it makes up for it. But here we have to be built off of that discipline culturally. And y'all following me? I'm making sense. So
yeah, and I was gonna say, NIL wasn't around. Well, officially, NIL wasn't around, Darren, when you played. But how does that impact, the student athlete, or especially at a program like UAB, a G5? Like, could that be, you talk about going to the league, which I'm sure that's everybody's goal, but wouldn't that make practice a little more meaningful too, with NIL opportunities and with the transfer portal as well? Like, how would that have impacted you if, say, both of those, NIL and the portal was around, but if both of those were more significant during your playing days at UAB?
I would say that can definitely be something that, if your culture is not established and it's not on the forefront of everybody's mind, and I'm pretty sure all programs are dealing with this, but I can do that. No, half of those guys aren't focused on the main mission. They're young. You're young. You're impressionable. And if you see your teammate, if I see Jacob Zeno, just got $50,000, and depending on what type of guy it is, I promise you, there's guys in the locker room that's going to flaunt that, and they're going to get the cars, or they're going to do some stuff. That's going to be the main focus. Like, this generation is all about, got to go get the bag. But they don't know how to properly go get the bag. They think about the bag, but they don't think about everything in between, the steps in between. You should focus on the steps. That will take care of itself. But I can see, from what I think is what's going on with a lot of teams, is like, guys are just going to be focused on that. If you can get that, I'm out of here. I'm going to do it. And you got to think, a lot of these guys come from backgrounds that aren't the best. I don't know if people really know that, but the reality of college football is, in the locker room, I was like, I was broke coming up here, right? Like, my family didn't come. I ain't come from nothing. I always joke with Matt McCants. I used to tell him, I'm like, man, we the brokest dudes at UAB, like, period. We would always just joke around, because we came from nothing. Me, Jonathan Perry, the quarterback, like, it's real life stuff going on. Trent talked about that with C-Dem. Like, hey, sometimes it's real life stuff that's going on that transcends football. So, and then I can see inflated egos with NIL too. If I'm a 19-year-old kid and my freshman year, I go off, somebody offered me $200,000. What would y'all do with $200,000? Think about 19-year-old you, still in college, not even a professional yet, with $200,000. Imagine what your ego would be.
Yeah, I sure wouldn't invest it. It'd be gone. It'd be gone. Yeah.
But I'm, just going back to me though, like, and going back to the discipline of it, like, I wish now, and that's why I really wanted to speak on this. I wish that I would have had the discipline to go along with the love. And I think that's something that, culturally, when you have more BTs and people like that around to be an example, especially if you didn't have a dad or a mom that was an example of that, how would you know? You're just going to fall victim into the environment. And I'm going to get more into the environment of it later, and how that affects everything. Second thing I thought about was accountability versus excuses, right? And I think this one is easy, but certain guys that hop in that transfer portal, It's because coach was doing this, I did this, and da 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 da. You know, they have all the excuses in the world. I just wasn't getting a fair shot. Blah blah blah. I love reading that article. Like I love reading it when he talked about Ryan Gunter, and he basically said Gunter was on a 5-year plan. That's unheard of. But to be accountable enough and kind of look around and be like, and if you're looking in practice and you saying this guy's beating me, this guy's beating me, this guy just came into the program, he's outshining me, instead of saying coaches ain't coaching me right. Like what's Lyle Henley doing? I'm not getting stronger, right? Instead of doing that, you need guys to be like, that's what it is. I need to get better. I need to get better. I need to work that much harder. Let me not compete with them. I have to compete with the best version of myself. So I love a lot of this stuff in this article and what Trent is saying, because it's so important. It's so important because I'm gonna go back to when I played. I came into a team that had a lot of talent. I can tell y'all now, Jeffrey Anderson should have been a 10-year vet NFL tight end. We had Matt McCann, NFL. We had Chris Hubbard, NFL. Terrence Edge was my guard. He should have been an NFL player. I had the potential to be an NFL player, right? Brian Turner, Elliott Henry. We had so many guys, Jamie Bender. I can just name them. And they were like, I've seen NFL guys. These guys were like that. But when I came in, when I tell y'all that the belief of the team, the culture of the team was kind of like, it was a disconnect somewhere. And if you come into no one cared about getting better. I can say that. No one attacked practice like, hey man, we need to get better. We need to make sure we focus. It was like, man, when is practice over with? That was the culture here at UAB. Like, all right, man, we were suffering through practices. Like, we got to run it again. Man, come on. Like, we got to get up. People
you didn't have that cover. You didn't have that cover pavilion either.
You didn't? Oh, it was hot. It was hot when we used to go to Legion, during the spring, and it had that turf out there, the worst. But that's all you thought about. I think it was on the staff and on the players as well, because I don't think the communication, like the messaging was getting, like we didn't know the purpose. I mean, you would hear stuff like, oh, and we had some good staff, but I think that comes from the top down. We were getting the coaching, but it's the communication, the purpose, the togetherness on what's the mission statement. Like, we didn't have that thing to focus on. That's what I feel like. So a lot of the guys like a BT, who was so disciplined and stood for everything culturally, those guys will get drowned out. Because for every BT, you have 5 non-BTs. That's kind of like, yo, I can't wait to get this over with. I'm ready to go smoke. I'm finna hit the party. We was partying Thursday through Sunday, right? Like, I'm finna go to Martinis. I'm finna go to Rain. We finna turn up. We finna go to Zydeco. Sam Hunt is over there performing today, right? like we were everywhere. Like, and the focus, I can tell y'all, the focus was football when the game was there, when the game was on. But all of a sudden, you can't turn it on like that. I don't know who was doing any extra workouts. I don't know who was doing. I don't know who was doing any extra film study. Our culture was not built on football. Now, I think half of that came from the fans too. Because think about it, as you a UAB guy and you walk around, I'm barely seeing anybody with UAB gear on. I see Roll Tide, War Eagle, blah blah blah. That's all I'm seeing. I look in the stands. It's probably 7,000 people there. Half of them like our family and stuff. It's hard to keep that motivation going. So there was no internal belief. And then, you look at our previous record, right? Like, you're losing Nobody really cares. I'm finna have fun. I'm finna go have fun. And then when the game come, we practice. I did enough, right? I'm tired, whatever. And I just think that the culture, the BTs of the world, Brian Turner's, they got drowned out. So it creates a toxic culture. Like everything was about like how to skirt around, how to cheat something. Like, hey man, go over there with those girls. They can help you online with this class. You cheat on this test. You take this teacher so you can get away with this. We focused more on that than getting better. All right. So I don't know if you guys have any like examples. Like I said, I just didn't want to ramble. I don't know if you guys could understand, or if you got any thoughts on that. I didn't know if y'all know how the culture was, but I believe that was the reason why we were losing and I think people just think that the players sucked. That was not true. I can tell y'all that right now, that was not true. We had some very, very talented players here.
What do you think, Darian, about, I guess it was Neil Callaway that was the head coach. Did you have you just played under Neil, right?
Yep.
So it looks like Neil started in 2007. Do you think that culture, you said that obviously it wasn't at its best when you were there. Do you think in 2007, like you weren't there, you can't speak to it personally, but what I'm curious of is, did that staff walk in like other staffs and like they had defined a culture, and then culture's constantly evolving. It's either going the right way or the wrong way. I don't know, like if you heard from players that were there before you, like do you think it started off like many other cases where they had walked in, they tried to set their culture, and there was too many challenges associated with the program and in its entirety where it became difficult? Or I don't know, what were you hearing from like some of the guys who maybe recruited you to come to UAB about the culture before you got there?
Yeah, I definitely, that's good because first of all, we got to start with the facilities. The facilities doesn't inspire. It didn't at that time. It didn't inspire any kind of "we believe in you," right? Like it didn't. I remember after some home games, sometimes the hot water didn't work at Legion, like so you could take a shower. Like there was nothing from the top that showed us as players, and subconsciously, you probably didn't even think about it, but subconsciously that ekes into it. And I think that ekes into like the staff's mind too when they're fighting. They're fighting to get these the stadium, and like Coach Callaway had a picture, a render of the stadium and everything. When I remember walking to his office, I'm like, yeah, that's what he wanted to build to, like, so. But who was the coach right before Coach Callaway? I can't think of his name.
Watson Brown.
Coach Watson. So I heard a lot of good things about Coach Watson, right? Like I did. But, and I don't think it's a fault of his, was he did recruit a lot of talented players. But I remember some of the players, they told me when they first came in, they had some of the Watson guys still here. I can't remember who specifically told me this story, but it was like 3 of them. They was telling me this. I can tell you they were starters. They was like, man, when we first got here, it was a couple of the leaders of the team from the Watson era was like, man, you over there going to study hall? Man, we don't do that. Man, like, man, just sign right here. Like, it started off as basically, it's like and I go back to the environment, you kind of succumb to the environment you in, especially if you're a freshman and you coming in and you want to be accepted. You just want to be accepted socially, right? Like we are still talking about young boys. You want to be cool. You want the older guys to like you. They know the landscape. So you're kind of gonna go with whatever they say. They telling you not to go to study hall, man. It started out like that for them coming in. Basically, hey man, we here to have fun. We're having fun, Don't do all that dork. You nerd. Don't do all of that. Stop being a dork and you come over here and have fun. So it started like that with guys, and that started from the top down, right? And then trickled all the way down. So It got all the way to us. It got to me. When I think about myself back in that, I kind of see myself from my lens now, knowing everything I know. I kind of see myself as like a fraudulent leader back then. On the face, I was good. Like as the face, I could talk to the teachers, and for the most part, I made pretty good decisions. But when it came down to the real cultural stuff, doing that, I felt like I felt like I did more than them. But like I'm the highest jumper. Well, he jumped an 18-inch vertical. You jumped 19. You're not jumping high, you know. So I was comparing myself to them, like to other guys. When I say them, other teammates, I'm like, I'm doing more than them. That's it. But now that I look back at it, I didn't compete to be the best version of myself. And I feel like that version of myself probably would have went to the league, which I'm happy how my story played out because I'm everything that I wasn't back in college. Thank the Lord for growth and thank the Lord for good people around me to help me see that. So I'm cool with how my story played out. No regrets. But if I'm being real about it, I wasn't the leader that I could have been or that I should have been. And I understand why sometimes some coaches was frustrated with me because why am I comparing myself to that? So that's why I understand culture so much, and I know how important it is because I know how it can either elevate you or that culture will bring you all the way down. As soon as those players step on the field, if you have the wrong guys culturally, they're gonna teach them their ways. You got to get those guys. I don't care how talented they are. They have to get out of here. What's up, Jimmy?
Hey, I was going to ask you, speaking of culture, we know that Dilfer has said that he'll double and triple down when it comes to culture. In a recent interview, they were talking about, John touched on it, NIL, and some programs are kind of backing away from the emphasis of culture because of the transactional environment of college athletics. But as we sit here and we're preparing to enter year 2 of the Trent Dilfer regime at UAB, what are some things that you've heard Trent say, some of the things that you've observed or heard from the players, your personal interactions that you're liking about the culture that the new staff is trying to instill for this UAB football program?
And I think it's important to note, like, we're a competitive G5, but it's still G5, right? So a lot of those guys, it'll be cool if we can compete with the Ohio States and the Alabamas of the world for talent. But honestly, right now, that's not realistic. We're going to build to get there, right? But we can't go about it the way that they go about it, right? They can just go get the best talent. And that, like, again, that's a big difference with the resources they have. They can be transactional like that. They can be the G League for the NFL because that's all it really is now. I mean, they paying everybody, but they have the means and the resources to just be transactional. I don't think we can just be transactional, right? The players also, like the guys that come here, and we compete with other programs and we do beat out other teams, but we're not beating out the Michigans and Ohio States right now, right? In order to sell ourselves, but in order to really build, we have to develop, we have to have culture, right? We can't be just transactional. Now, maybe if you build yourself up to, like, if you're a Zeno, you build yourself up, now you can kind of talk, but you put that work in to get to that point, right? And I think the culture of development and honesty from the coaches. So when I see guys, right, and I see guys that's bought into it, when I see Emmanuel Waller, and we talked about him and how he's changed his body, it looks totally different. We talked about Jordan Hall, right, how he's lost all of this weight. It's so many of those young guys that I see that's already changed their body. You can see it on them, and then when you talk to them, you feel the excitement. You can feel like, hey, we're building something. And it seems like you have this hive mindset of, they know this mission statement and they know the steps to get there. More importantly, you can know what you want to do, but you have to know, more importantly, how to get there. You have to do it in unison, right? and you have to have those guys like those Brian Turners. They can't get drowned out. That has to be the mindset, especially at this level. If you want to go compete with those guys, we got to do it differently, right? So, and I think, I think Bill Clark, right? I think Bill Clark did a great job of coming in and kind of getting this hive mindset. I think he was the one to establish it here, all right? The only thing I probably would say about that, I think offensively guys were starting to get frustrated because our offense was kind of stagnant at times, and I think that's where the frustration and you started to see some cracks in the culture, because guys like, hey man, I need the ball, like, what are we doing? We're gonna run three. We're gonna run, Dwayne McBride like 3 times up the middle, and probably try to throw it to a tight end or Shropshire somewhere down there. Let's throw it up like it was the same old thing. So I think guys, but that had nothing to do with the guys he was recruiting or what he was doing on a mission statement. That was more X's and O's, right? But he was the guy that established real culture here of winning and how to win and the steps you have to take. So I thank him. But now what I see in the players and what I see from the coaches, when I hear from them, I'm like, I believe in it so much because I know that's everything that we didn't have. Like all of the resources and everything that they're teaching culture-wise, we didn't have that at all.
Now, Darren, looking at kind of off the field building culture, which is arguably just as important as the on-field culture. Trent Dilfer, as Jimmy said, year 2, he started the Serve, Grow, Launch. Emphasizing the importance of giving back to the community, which I know Bill did a little bit of that, but shoot, even through 1 year, I think Trent has done the staff and team program has done a lot more off the field, whether it's, Habitat for Humanity, a bunch of other things. How did y'all do that? Any like off the field stuff?
We did a little bit.
But how important is that to give back to the community, but also build these relationships, further deep relationships with your teammates?
And I think, I saw the piece on Zaire Flournoy, and he talked about how that really helped him grow through his injury. And the difference between us doing it and the way that they're doing it, I think when we did it, it was just like, man, let's just go do this to get some community hours, basically. It's kind of like an internship. Like, I gotta go do this real quick. If you're not gonna do it and not know, if you're gonna do it and not know the purpose, the reason you're doing it for no reason. You're doing it for no reason. You're doing it to let me just go ahead. But you have to understand why you're doing it, and you have to tap into like, how does this help me grow as a better human? Because let me tell you, like, these kids at this age, a lot of them need to be better human beings. They need to, because that helps them become better football players. I don't know if people know the correlation to it, but it helps you with your discipline. It helps you with your appreciation. You appreciate the opportunity that you have, so therefore you take it seriously, so therefore you put more into it, right? Like, you have to understand, you have to have that mindset, that flow. You really have to break it down. We didn't have anybody breaking it down for us. It's kind of like, go do this, go do that, right? Why am I doing it? Why am I doing it? What this got to do with football? That's what I'm thinking. Like, oh, bro, like, I don't want to do this. Like, but once you tap into the why and what is it doing for me, you start realizing that it serves me more than it serves the people that you're serving. Right? I know this now. I know when I do stuff for people, I know this now, especially when you become a father, right? And you're really there for your kids. You're like, man, I like seeing you succeed more than I like seeing my own self succeed. It's that kind of that same feeling. It's like, it helps you grow, right? And the growth is what we have to do at this level, right? And it's so cool just seeing the opportunity given the guys to grow. No matter the talent that we bring in, prove me wrong, right? Because we're developing guys, we're believing in that. If the players feel like, oh, the coaches see my development is paying off, they're gonna give me an opportunity. Trust me, more guys will buy in. And I just want fans to understand, like, this is a process. This is how you build something. Like, this is how you build a real program. If we want to take it to that next level, we have to establish these things, and we still got to see the results of it. But I can tell you firsthand, we won't have a chance if we don't build culture, no matter the players you bring in, no matter the talent you bring in, because the culture will drown it out, and you will not get the squeeze from the lemon from that player if you have bad culture. Those dudes gonna come in there and be like, look what they was doing, you know? And I just wanted to shout out a couple of guys that I felt like they were the holdovers that bought in. I felt like just left it in a good position culturally. Like, when we look at Skull, you know, coming off injury, started slow. But Skull, like, I don't know, man. It was just something about Skull that you could see that he really bought in. Not only the highlight plays, how many times on this podcast did we talk about his blocking? Right? He was probably the smallest back out there. Like, he was probably the smallest, but he was the best blocker. Even more than, like, Debo probably outweighed him probably about 30, 40 pounds, maybe. Whatever. But we felt when it was time to pass the ball downfield, hey, man, we got to have Skull out there, man. Skull's going to stick his nose in there. He might knock a 230-pound linebacker on his butt. Right? And he was just all excitement. Right? He was just, you can tell he bought in, and Trent talked about him a lot. I always heard good things about Michael Fairbanks. You know, no matter if he played out of position or not, he gave it his all. I saw that. We talked about Nakia Eason. When he came in, undersized or not, the dude was he saved us a couple of times last year, right? To John Palmer. If you don't know, like, he had the production, but go look at his pro day. Look at his body. Look at his body. You can tell that's a guy that stayed locked in all season. I can't tell you how many guys, when I talked about that bad culture, I'm talking about me too when I talk about this. I can't tell you how many guys from that period, from the end of the season until pro day, we ho-hum it. It's just like, go work out here. I go do this, a little bit of this. You ho-hum it around, and then you think, pro day, this my time. This is my time. How many guys you see on the internet post about their pro day? And I'm sitting here thinking, like, dude, you ain't going nowhere for real. But when I saw Tajon Palmer and I saw his body, and then I saw him run that 40 and all the stuff, I said that's the definition of a guy that stayed locked in the whole time. That's culture. Those are the guys you look at and be like, and you see them be successful. And if I'm a younger guy, if I'm Amari Thomas, if I'm Cam Shanks, Iverson Hooks, I'm looking over at Tajon Palmer's like, okay, that's what I need to do. I got to stay locked in the whole time. The results will take care of themselves. Posting your pro day on Twitter, that, trust me, bro, it ain't your time. It ain't your time. It's not. Like, we all been through that. You know, everybody posts that. But it's about away from social media. So I just wanted to shout out guys like that. You know, Swoops is another guy that started off slowly. Eventually he bought in, and you can see the results on the field. You know, I don't know if I'm missing anybody. Those were the guys off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Overs.
Real quick, just a newcomer last year, Isaiah Jacobs, immediately jumping into the community service, you know, and he's still not 100% back, and he's still at the Jimmy Hill mission right now, you know, our last month serving. So that was one of the guys that really stood out to me from last year. I mean, hey, and that was a newcomer coming in, showing leadership. You know, hey, how can I help this community out? I know I'm new, but I want to give back already. So I was really impressed with Isaiah Jacobs.
Right, and that's a good one, because I saw him speaking at the church, and when he talks, he sounds so professional. Then you look at his body and how he take care of himself. This is the whole package, and that's what you need at programs like this, because you're gonna bring in these younger guys. You bring in a you got Lee Beebe. Look at Lee Beebe and what he did as a guy that was a walk-on, I believe, right, and how he's taking care of himself, and he sees the opportunity, right. A guy that's not a holdover, but I really appreciate his story. It was like Noah Wilder. and how he came, because he came from Gardner Webb out of nowhere. Was it Gardner Webb?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just out of nowhere. It was just like, who is this random dude out on the field? Like, and then he was just making plays all over, right? So, and then I love the stories of like Kadeem Telford, like that got into trouble while he was at Florida. Totally changed himself at JUCO, and he came back. And from all I heard was how much of a great teammate and hard worker he was. You know, a guy that got kicked out of school, right? But and then I look at some of the guys on the team now. So when I look at the younger guys, I look at Rusal. You know, if you look at if all of the UAB hype videos, or when when we were playing in the game and we won, the first guy you almost would always see was Rusal. He'll be sitting there just like celebrating, just excited, right? That's almost like that Joe Webb love of the game that I'm talking about. Like, when you see Kobe Dempsey and he came back, and the staff and how Trent still talked of him highly, even though he was in the portal and he came back. He was one of those guys I see the love of the game, right? Like, he will always celebrate, and it seems like, I call it aura. They just seem like people are just attracted to guys like that, and how they talk about TJ Jones and how he's developed into a professional. He's another guy with that aura. Like, we talked to him, he's like a favorite of ours, right? He's just, that personality is so strong. But if you get that guy now with, to John Palmer, habits with his charisma and personality, now that's how you build culture, right? Like, it all meshes together. So I want to give those guys their flowers and their love. And like the Delano Townsends, we see him working out. The Jordan Halls, we talked about Emmanuel Waller, the Luke Jones and how he improved. Like, I can keep on going down the list, but I really appreciate those guys.
And I know we're going to have to wrap in a couple minutes, but Jimmy mentioned earlier about culture evolving. It's going to continue to evolve under the Trent Dilfer era. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, and we also touched on this a little bit on our Patreon. But when you see Will Parker being no longer with the team, and Trent publicly, through Steve Irvine's article, bhambanner.com, saying he just, culturally just, wasn't fitting right with or sitting well with us, what his decisions. What would you say, and not just to Will Parker specifically, but anybody that, has had that happen, like, hey, you got to get right. But what would your message be to a Will Parker?
Yeah, I want people, it's kind of like a breakdown to build up, right? So let's start. Will Parker was a starting left tackle for our team, right? Like, started all games, and we had a big need at left tackle. What I would say to Will is, it's going to be all about accountability first, right? You can't sit there and act like, when I look at your film, Will was inconsistent. That's the truth. So your mindset has to change. And now, whether you feel like, you were wronged or whatever, something happened to where it's got to be drastic, to where your starting left tackle is off of the team. But then I also look at your film and say, if you take all that stuff away, realistically, what I would tell him to his face, like, bro, you weren't good enough to be making those mistakes. I would say Jordan Hall and the DJ Jones and all those guys we got recruited, I would say they had a good chance of beating you out anyway, right? Like, if I'm being real, like, you can't focus on those things, or you should focus more, whether it was grades or whether it was attitude, or you have to be better in those areas. You have to have more discipline to be better in those areas, so you can work on your game, so you can come back and show how much you improved. Because honestly, you weren't the strongest lineman out there, right? You were not. You have the potential to be better. You do. But if you let those other things get you kicked off of this team as the starter, the reality was you were not going to get better. I would say this, when Kadeem Telford, if it was 3rd and 11, and Kadeem was out there, and I'm looking if it's a Trey Moore or something, I'm like, oh, I thank God we got Kadeem. I think he can hold up. It's a 50. I got faith in my guy. When Will Parker was out there, I didn't have that same feeling. I did not. Right? It was kind of like, man, you go back to that Navy game. That dude was beating you. I can tell you what games. I'm just like, dude, like give Logan Moore a chance, because my trust isn't there. But on the other hand, I look at certain games and I look at flashes of him. I'm like, this dude got it. Like, he got it. It's coming together. That's what I felt. But I will say this to Will. So that was the negative of it. That was the bad of it. I will say this to Will. Life happens to everybody, and we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And sometimes our wake-up calls are more harsh than other wake-up calls. I would say that you will get another opportunity. And with this opportunity, don't waste it, because this could be your last opportunity at football. You already came from Tennessee. You came to UAB. You got kicked off. That's going to leave a stain. That's going to leave a stain right there. But I just talked about Kadeem Telford. He got kicked off of Florida, went to JUCO, totally changed around. He's in the NFL, right? If I was him, it's time to just take a look at him. Don't blame. We talked about accountability versus excuses. Don't blame them. Thank them. Thank them. You needed that. You needed that, bro. Whatever happened, you needed that. I've heard some things, and it ain't on me to come here and repeat and be a gossip chatty patty. You thank them for that wake up call. You lock in. I'm talking about all the way lock in. Get rid of whatever that was hindering you that got off the field, that got you kicked off. You make those weaknesses into strengths, and you come back on the field and you work as hard as you can. It's not the end of your story, right? You got people that depend on you. You got family that you're gonna make proud. What I would love to see, and I don't care if he talk about UAB like a dog. I really don't care. But as just a young man, what I love to see, he can use UAB hate as motivation. Like, I hate them over there. If that's what it takes to get you to lock in, to realize your shortcomings and become the best version of yourself, I'm happy. I just want to see a good ending for him. Not just football wise, but life wise. So many of these guys, they get into this bubble of football. You're protected with scholarship money and housing and food. When that bubble pop, it's sad. It's very sad to see. You have a lot of guys, some guys don't get their degree, or they get a useless degree. They don't build connections, and they probably were turds the whole time here, so people don't like them. They don't want to help them out. It's like, man, go. You finally go away. Where do you go? What do you do? Your people probably from the hood. You don't really want to go back there, right? What life starts. Life starts. What you gonna do? What you gonna? And I've seen so many guys succumb to that bubble, and it is heartbreaking, because at one point those were your comrades, your brothers, and y'all did all this stuff, and then 5 years later, you like 28, or you look around, you like, that's such and such. Hey man, I had that happen to a guy, and it was sad to see. It was one of my teammates I love. I remember looking at him like, brother, God, I ain't know what to say. It happens too often, and I don't want that for Willie. I really don't. That is so heartbreaking to see. What I want to see is Willie thrive, whether it's in football, going to the NFL. That's good, but I want to see him make good connections. I want to see him be a great father. I want to see him have a successful career, and I want to see him have respected loved ones around him that really care about him. That's where you win at. That's what it's all about.
Hey, Darren, my final question is, how do you define a culture of success? Is it going to be merely measured by wins and losses in the context of college football and college athletics? Like we started off with saying, which is true, is that, culture is typically a corporate buzzword. There's a lot of things that we say. Culture speaks to the the habits, the social norms within an organization typically. But at some point, you were just talking about Will Parker and what he says about, UAB football moving forward. It kind of reminds me of like when an employee leaves an organization where they're going to write an Indeed about their time with the organization. But what's it gonna take for us to sit back here 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Is it even for us to decide, is the culture of UAB football successful? Is that even something from a fan, a former player, whomever, for us to decide? But what would it take, I guess, in your mind, to look back and say the culture of the UAB football program was a success under our current staff?
I think it's a trickle down. I think that's what it is. So I don't look at it year by year as I think wins and losses are part of it, because I think it trickles down into it, right? But I think it trickles down into the fans. It trickles down into the environment, the excitement, and all of that stuff contributes to the environment around and the wins and losses. It trickles down into recruiting. It's all, but it starts inward. And I think of like LeBron's career, right? Like LeBron is a guy that's been top of the game for like 21 years, but he hasn't won the championship every year. He didn't even make the playoffs some years, right? But every year, that guy is coming because of the discipline and all the culture he has himself, So I think of it like that. It's like sustainability, the longevity of it, right? And it may change from year to year, from wins to losses. We think about Bill Clark, and what he was able to do. Now, granted, it was at CUSA, but he took literally nothing here, and we probably didn't win 8 games this year, but it was going to be above 500, and you knew we always had a chance. We always had a shot to win. We was always going to be in that championship talk. To me, that's what culture is, when you always give yourself a chance. And then how your players and how your staff and how they all talk about you, how the fans, how they all talk about you, all of that over time reveals itself. I think time is the big factor of it to really reveal everything about it. How those players come back, and players will talk about you. If they love you, you will know. Because you will run into somebody at the airport and be like, man, I met such and such. He was talking about you. He loved. Guys go on podcasts and talk about how influential you were in their lives. But I think it all kind of works together. If you looking at like a barometer, I think wins and losses are definitely part of it. I think we'll be fooling ourselves. Culture wouldn't be important if wins and losses weren't a part of it, right? So, but it starts there, especially at this level. And if we want to have a chance to have those special years to maybe we get to the college football playoffs, we can't do it without culture. We won't have a chance. So, yeah, I just look forward to the building and seeing if it'll pay off, if it's the right culture, if it's the right fit. Only time will tell.
Wow, this was a great discussion. I hope the audience enjoyed this as much as Jimmy and I did. But hey, make sure, if you are not subscribed to the Blazer Victory Podcast Patreon, we just dropped 2 episodes within the last week and a half. $5 a month gets you access to bonus content, multiple episodes a month. But you can go to patreon.com/blazerpod, or if you want to sign up for a year, you can save 10% off your subscription. But Darren, I will throw it to you to close us out. And if you have any
Hey man, I talked enough, man. Y'all close us out.
All right, Jimmy, close us out.
Hey, nothing but good vibes here at the Blazer Victory Podcast. Everybody have a great week. Go Blazers.
Fire breathers only.